pain that leaves no trace on the body. No blood, no scar, no scream. Yet it corrodes something far more fragile than flesh. Your very sense of self. This pain is disrespect. You feel it when your words are brushed aside as if they carried no weight, when your kindness is taken for weakness, when your generosity is received with cold indifference. And the most devastating blow often comes not from the insult itself, but from your silence as it happens. Machiavelli, the relentless examiner of human nature, would call that silence not humility, but surrender. He would warn that disrespect is like a weed creeping into the garden of your identity. Tolerate it once, and it begins to spread until it strangles your confidence and steals your worth. This is not a matter of fragile pride. It is a question of power. It shapes how the world sees you, and even more dangerously, how you begin to see yourself. You were raised to be kind, to forgive, to turn the other cheek. There is beauty in that teaching, but beauty is not protection. In a world that often rewards strength over sentiment, unguarded kindness becomes a currency without value. That is where Machiavelli's ruthless clarity slices through illusion. His book, The Prince, was not written for saints who dream of perfect worlds. It was written for those forced to survive in a world that devours the naive. He saw that the virtuous are not destroyed for their goodness, but for their failure to wield it strategically. His most famous line captures this harsh truth. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Yet this was never a call to cruelty. It was a command to command. Fear, in his sense, is not violence. It is the power of presence, the authority of boundaries that cannot be ignored. It is about becoming so undeniable that disrespect finds no ground to grow. Now we bring Machiavelli's insight into the world you inhabit. You may not wear a crown or sit on a throne, but you are the ruler of your time, your energy, and your space. Like a fortress guarded by high walls, your life depends on the strength of the boundaries you defend. Leave the gates unguarded, and they will be breached. Respect works like a mirror. It reflects exactly what you project. When you stand upright, it returns dignity. When you bend too easily, it reflects something smaller, something weaker. People read those signals, whether you intend them to or not. Disrespect often does not shout. It comes disguised as a joke at your expense, as a compliment wrapped in condescension, as a decision made without your voice in the room. Too often, we dismiss these moments, laughing along to avoid conflict, staying silent because we fear confrontation or because we doubt our worth. Yet each time you accept less than you deserve, you teach the world that less is acceptable. Not out of cruelty, but because human nature is opportunistic. People test limits without even realizing it. And when they meet no resistance, they push further. This is where Machiavelli's lion and fox enter. They are not relics of Renaissance politics. They are living archetypes for navigating modern life. The fox sees through deception. It recognizes the hidden trap inside flattery, the quiet power play concealed beneath polite words. It is the instinct that senses when so-called kindness is a bid for control. The lion, in contrast, does not roar at every slight. Its strength lies in the gravity of its presence, an unshakable force that commands respect without a word spoken. In practice, this means mastering the discipline of measured response. Not every insult deserves your energy, but every insult deserves your awareness. You may not always confront, but you must always adjust. That adjustment might mean pulling back, drawing a line, cutting access. Stop placing your trust and your time in the hands of those who treat them carelessly. Respect is not something to be begged for. It is something to claim. And sometimes, The most powerful claim you can make is to walk away until respect is the only response left. True power, at its core, is stillness. It is the calm that unsettles, the silence that draws attention without effort. When you recognize your worth and refuse to tolerate disrespect, your silence transforms into its own commanding language. Machiavelli understood this psychological force with exact precision. He knew that people do not react to the private truth of your inner world. They react to the signals you project. Confidence, strength, and value are not things you announce. They are things you embody. In a culture obsessed with fleeting approval, where validation is chased like a drug, authentic self-respect is rare. And in rarity lies value. What is valuable is guarded. What is guarded is treated with care. So how do you shift this balance in your favor? It begins with redefining what kindness means. True kindness is not about enduring mistreatment or making yourself small for the comfort of others. It is about discernment. It is the choice to be generous yet unexploitable, compassionate yet unyielding. Machiavelli would remind you that your worth multiplies the moment you stop trying to prove it. Stop over-explaining your value. Stop apologizing for simply existing. Stop shrinking yourself so others can stand taller. When you anchor yourself in your own dignity, you stop chasing approval and start commanding acknowledgement. And people sense it. They hear it in your silence. They feel it in your presence. Their words grow more careful, their attention sharper, because you are no longer asking to be seen, you are requiring it. Disrespect cannot survive in the presence of unshakable self-respect. That is the art. Not to retaliate with venom, but to elevate yourself above the arena where disrespect thrives. To make your presence the standard others must reach if they wish to remain in your orbit. This is not arrogance. It is alignment with reality. The reality that your time is sacred, your voice has weight, and your heart is not a public square for careless footsteps. So stop explaining the damage their words cause. Stop granting endless chances to those who squandered the first. And above all, never confuse silence born of fear with the silence born of strength. Machiavelli understood a truth most resist. The world is not fair, but it is predictable. Those who learn to read people, who master the unspoken rules of power, move with a kind of elegance that feels inevitable. This is not about manipulation or petty games. It is about playing with wisdom, knowing when to speak, when to withdraw, and when to sever ties not in rage but in composure. For the highest act of power is not retaliation, it is departure. And when you live in this way, something extraordinary occurs. The world begins to bend around you. People rise to meet the standard you embody, or they fade into the background. Either way, the victory is yours. This is how disrespect is dismantled. Not by shouting louder, but by embodying the stillness of the lion and the sharpness of the fox. By letting silence carry more weight than words. By ensuring that the first person who never diminishes you is yourself. From there, the question deepens. How does this philosophy breathe in your daily life? How does it shape the way you handle relationships, decisions, and the private dialogue you carry with yourself? The answers lie in the mirror. You now understand the lesson, the lion's poise, the fox's cunning, the quiet authority that commands respect without ever begging for it. You know that tolerating disrespect, even in its most polite disguise, only invites more of it. But awareness alone is not transformation. The true test comes when these principles leave the page and enter your lived reality. Your relationships, your home, your workplace, the reflection you face each morning. The challenge sharpens when disrespect wears the face of someone you love, someone bound to you by blood or history. Walking away from a stranger is easy. Walking away from the familiar wound is far harder. Part of you still aches for recognition, for their choice to see you fully. That longing is the trap. Believing that patience will one day teach them your worth is a lie that chains you to the cycle. Machiavelli knew that when sentiment outweighs sovereignty, rulers fall. And the same is true for individuals. Disrespect does not always thunder into your life. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides in neglect, in the silence of being overlooked, in always being the last considered or the first blamed. You may excuse it as unintentional, but intention does not erase impact. A wound is still a wound, whether the blade slipped by accident or struck with design. This is where most falter. They wait until disrespect becomes unmistakable, expecting it to roar before they act. But by then, the damage has already been done. Self-respect does not usually shatter in a single blow. It erodes slowly, drip by drip, moment by moment. The question is how to act sooner, how to see the signs before they harden into wounds. The answer lies in paying attention to the silences between moments. Notice how you feel when you leave someone's presence. Do you feel lighter or heavier? Do you feel more like yourself or less? The world rarely insults you in one dramatic stroke. It tests you quietly, probing, searching for weakness, waiting to see if you will flinch. When you do not respond, the pressure deepens, not because others are always malicious, but because you have signaled that your boundaries are flexible, not firm. To break this cycle, you must tune into those subtle signals, those whispers from your instincts that tell you something is wrong. That is where Machiavelli's clarity becomes a weapon, teaching you to see the test before it becomes a wound, to act with precision before the damage compounds. Now picture a different way of living. Imagine each boundary you set not as an act of fear, but as an act of self-respect. See yourself addressing disrespect without anger, yet with unshakable clarity. Envision walking away not because others reject you, but because you refuse to remain in any place where you must beg for worth. This is the meeting point between philosophy and self-respect, where dignity becomes not a fleeting feeling but a discipline. Every time you choose not to explain away your boundaries, you strengthen them. Every time you step back from those who will not listen, you affirm that your soul matters. Every time you refuse to trade dignity for temporary peace, you take your rightful place as the ruler of your own life. Never forget this truth. You are always teaching the world. With every silence, every refusal, every acceptance, you declare what will and will not be allowed. And more importantly, you are teaching yourself. Machiavelli grasped this truth with the precision of a master strategist. He understood that the mind will justify what the heart allows. People remain in spaces that quietly erode them because they wrap those spaces in stories. They call it love. They call it family. They call it loyalty. But is loyalty still a virtue when it demands the sacrifice of your self-respect? When your very identity must shrink to fit inside a room, you have to ask yourself if that room is sacred or if it is a prison disguised as nostalgia. The lion does not dwell in a cage, and the fox does not return to a trap. To reflect is to confront your life without illusion, and to ask, what have I tolerated that should have ended long ago? Who am I permitting to speak to me in ways I would never accept from a stranger? And why? The answer often points to fear. Not fear of conflict, but fear of abandonment. We imagine that if we assert ourselves, people will leave. We fear that if we refuse to bend, we will be left alone. Yet the liberating truth is this: Those who disappear when you honor yourself were never invested in your growth. They were feeding on your diminishment. Their departure is not a loss,